Never judge someone's worth by the color of their skin. Never assume you understand a person based on stereotypes. Never mistake humility for weakness. And never forget that dignity, equity, and respect are for every human being. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please help us contribute your quota by clicking the subscription button. Thank you. A knock echoed through the grand foyer like an accusation. It wasn't polite, not even curious, just sharp, impatient, as though the person on the other side believed they had every right to command the house they were entering. Grace Morgan paused on a marble staircase, her hand resting lightly on the polished oak banister. Morning sunlight streamed through the high windows, painting warm gold on the walls. Her home, her achievement, stood quiet behind her. She took a breath and moved toward the door. Before she could reach it, the knock grew louder. "Hello," a voice barked. "Is anyone in there? Housekeeping? Maintenance? You need to open up." Grace's step slowed. "Housekeeping." She opened the door gently. On the porch stood Mrs. Bradford, tall, rigid posture, pearls, perfume strong enough to match her presence. Accompanying her was her husband, Mr. Bradford, who carried the expression of someone always expecting to be obeyed. Their eyes swept over Grace, then exchanged a knowing look that spoke volumes. "Finally," Mrs. Bradford muttered, stepping forward as if she owned the ground. "We rang the bell twice and knocked 3 times. Service here is so unreliable." Grace blinked. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Bradford chuckled, the condescending kind. "Yes, you can move our luggage to the guest room. My husband and I are here for the viewing. The homeowner should be arriving soon." Grace drew a slow breath. The Bradfords had scheduled a tour of the luxury home she listed for sale last week. Except the house they wanted to view was hers, the one she had built from scratch after years of relentless work, sacrifice, and brilliance in the tech world. She could correct them. She could reveal the truth instantly. But something in their tone, the dismissiveness, the arrogance made her pause. She stepped aside. "Come in." Mrs. Bradford swept in without saying thank you. Mr. Bradford followed, eyeing the artwork on the walls. "Strange taste," he whispered. "Not sure the homeowner's no style." Grace remained calm. "This way, sir." Mrs. Bradford turned suddenly. "Before you continue, could you bring us something to drink? Sparkling water, preferably. And don't worry, we'll tip you if you're quick." She smiled as if delivering a reward. Grace's heart thudded, not from insecurity, but from the echo of every moment in her life where her skin was used to measure her worth and found wanting by others. She had lived through these assumptions. She had swallowed them, outgrown them, outperformed them. And now she stood in a house built by her very resilience, facing people who had no idea they were talking to the owner whose name was stamped on every document. She met Mrs. Bradford's gaze. Of course. As Grace walked toward the kitchen, voices floated behind her. "Imagine leaving people like her in charge of a home like this," Mr. Bradford muttered. "She probably doesn't even live nearby," Mrs. Bradford replied. "You can tell." "Yes," he agreed. "These days you never know who belongs where." Grace paused at the kitchen doorway, her eyes stinging, not from hurt, but from the weight of a truth she knew too well. They saw color first. They saw stereotypes second. They saw everything except the humanity, the story, the triumph standing right in front of them. She poured 2 glasses of sparkling water and returned. Mrs. Bradford took the glass without looking up. "Thank you, dear," she said, waving her hand dismissively. She sipped the drink, then wrinkled her nose. "Not cold enough. You should know better." Grace inhaled deeply. Her patience was not weakness. It was power. A storm gathering quietly. She led them to the living room, Mr. Bradford trailing behind, still making smug comments. "I hope the owners aren't anything unconventional." He glanced at Grace. "No offense." "None taken," Grace replied softly, but her silence held a fire he didn't know was burning. They continued the tour, through the dining hall, the study, the balcony overlooking the city skyline, the master suite with its floor-to-ceiling windows. Every room echoed with luxury, intelligence, and the carefully crafted life Grace had built. And still, they saw only what they wanted to see. At last, They stood in the grand living room, where the owners, Mrs. Bradford, demanded, "We have a luncheon at 2, and we prefer dealing directly with them. You can fetch them now." Grace stepped forward, calm, regal, ready. "They're already here," she said. Mrs. Bradford frowned. "Where?" "We haven't seen anyone fitting the profile of." Grace held up her hand gently. "Ma'am," she said, her voice steady, "I am Grace Morgan, the owner, the CO, the person you scheduled the appointment with. This is my home." Silence exploded into the room. Mrs. Bradford's mouth dropped open. Mr. Bradford's eyes darted around as if the walls had suddenly shifted. Their confidence evaporated, followed by embarrassment chasing it quickly. "You're the owner?" Mrs. Bradford whispered. "I am," Grace said. The woman stammered. Words tangled. Pride cracked. The arrogance vanished, leaving behind a tight discomfort. We didn't realize. I mean, you should have said." "I shouldn't have to," Grace replied. The truth hung heavy. Mrs. Bradford glanced at her husband, searching for something to hold on to, some excuse to explain away their behavior. But there was none. They had judged, assumed, dismissed, and disrespected because of their own bias, not her actions. Grace stood tall, her presence filling the room with the dignity they failed to recognize earlier. "Now," she continued, "shall we begin the tour properly?" The Bradfords exchanged a shaken look, and just as Mrs. Bradford opened her mouth, fumbling for words, a sudden sound broke the moment. A phone vibrating urgently on the table beside them. Grace's eyes flicked toward it. She recognized the number. Her expression shifted. Urgency, concern, something unexpected. She stepped forward to pick it up. "Excuse me," she said, answering the call. Her voice dropped. "Yes? What happened?" The pause was long. Too long. Her face tightened. Mrs. Bradford glanced nervously at her husband. Mr. Bradford shifted from foot to foot. Grace pressed her hand to her forehead. "Are you sure? I'll be there immediately." She ended the call. Silence filled the room again, but now the air was different, charged with something deeper, more urgent, more dangerous. Grace turned to Bradford's. "I'm afraid the tour will have to stop here," she said. "What's going on?" Mrs. Bradford asked, curiosity overriding her embarrassment. Grace didn't answer. She walked past them, heading toward the door with purposeful strides. The Bradfords followed. "Is everything okay?" Mr. Bradford asked. Grace paused at the threshold, gripping the doorknob, her jaw tight with unspoken tension. "No," she said softly. Then she opened the door. The wind rushed in, and with one final look over her shoulder, eyes filled with a truth deeper than anything they'd seen, she walked out, leaving the Bradfords staring after her, confused, humbled, and unaware that what awaited Grace outside would change everything. The door swung shut behind Grace, and the echo left the Bradfords suspended in awkward silence. The house that once felt like a stage for their judgments now felt impossibly large, too grand for their shrinking egos. Mrs. Bradford shifted her weight, her pearls clicking softly as she fidgeted. "Maybe we misinterpreted," she muttered weakly. Mr. Bradford didn't answer. He simply stared at the closed door, troubled by the memory of Grace's final expression, an expression not of anger, but of a deeper weight, something pressing heavily behind her eyes. Outside, the sun burned hot against the pavement. Grace's heels clicked on the driveway as she got into her car. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. The call replayed in her mind. "Grace, it's the board. There's been an incident." Her company, her legacy. Something had happened. She started the engine and sped down the sweeping driveway, past manicured hedges and gleaming gates that guarded her world. The city skyline came into view as she merged onto the highway, the familiar pulse of her ambition rising in her chest. Grace arrived at the company headquarters, a towering glass building that reflected the clouds and the sun like it owned both. Security greeted her with respect. Employees stepped aside as she strode in, sensing the electricity in her presence. She wasn't just a name on the wall. She was a heartbeat of the enterprise. The conference room stood full. Board members sat stiffly, murmuring. A digital screen glowed with paused footage. Grace entered without hesitation. All eyes turned toward her. "Grace," said Mr. Henry, one of the senior board members, rising. "We didn't want to alarm you, but you need to see this." Grace approached the table, gaze sharp. "Play it." The screen flickered to life. A video began. She instantly recognized the setting, the lobby of her company's innovation center. Two young black engineers, bright, hardworking, dedicated, were standing at the front desk, badges in hand. They were speaking calmly to two visiting investors who appeared confused. Then the shift happened. One investor raised his voice. "You people shouldn't be here without supervision." The room in the video stiffened. The engineers tried to explain. They worked there. They designed the prototype everyone had come to see. But the investors talked over them. Loud, ignorant, dismissive. Security entered, alerted by the noise. But instead of addressing the real problem, the officers demanded identification from the two black engineers, ignoring the raised voices of the white investors. Grace's jaw tightened. The screen showed one engineer trying to defend himself, his voice wavering with frustration. "Sir, we belong here. We designed this. Please." But security pushed him back. Hard. Grace inhaled sharply. The room around her faded. Only the video remained, a painful reminder of everything she fought against. Mr. Henry paused the footage. "We thought you should see this before the press does. It's already circulating online." Grace looked at the frozen image. One engineer's hands raised in helplessness, security looming over him, investors looking on with indignation instead of shame. "This is unacceptable," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed. Mr. Henry nodded gently. "We know, but there's more." Grace turned to him slowly. "More." He hesitated, then handed her a tablet. Grace scanned the screen. A headline stared back at her. "Breaking. Racial profiling incident at Morgan Tech headquarters." Comments flooded the page, some defending the engineers, others filled with hateful, ignorant assumptions. The online storm was brewing fast. Grace straightened. "This ends today," she said. She walked to the window, staring out over the city. Cars moved like tiny pulses of motion. Wind brushed the glass tower, and the world, her world, fell on the brink of change. "How soon can we assemble everyone?" she asked. Mr. Henry exchanged a look with the others. "You mean the staff?" "No," Grace answered. "Everyone. Entire company. Investors, press, community leaders, security, every department, every floor. I want them in the atrium in 1 hour." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Mr. Henry nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Grace stepped away from the window. The weight of prejudice was real, alive and well, but she had power now. A platform, a voice that stretched farther than the walls of her home, richer than the millions in her account, louder than the arrogance of those who underestimated her. She wouldn't just fix the incident. She would confront the system that allowed it. 1 hour later, the massive atrium buzzed with tension. Cameras clicked. Employees whispered. The engineering team stood together, bruised but supported. The two investors stood awkwardly at the back, suddenly not so bold. Security officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure what was coming. Grace stepped onto the raised platform. Her presence silenced the room. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried effortlessly. "Before we begin," she said, "I want you all to look at the screen behind me." The video played again. This time, no one looked away. Not a single person. Not even the guilty. Not even the embarrassed. Not even the ones who want to pretend they didn't see it. When the final frame froze, the engineer's face filled with hurt and disbelief. Grace stepped forward. "This," she said, "is not who we say we are." Her words cut through the air. "This is not excellence. This is not innovation. This is not leadership." She paused, gazing around the atrium. "This is bias. This is ignorance. This is injustice. And it cannot continue." The investors swallowed hard. The security officers bowed their heads slightly. Grace's eyes softened as she looked toward the engineers. "You belong here. Your intelligence, your work, your brilliance built the foundation of this company. And for that, you deserve respect, not suspicion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Grace continued, "We cannot claim to shape the future while repeating the failures of the past. Today, things change." She announced immediate reforms: diversity leadership training, revised security protocols, mandatory bias awareness workshops, and a new ethics oversight board led by voices long dismissed. Every word she spoke reshaped the atmosphere. Then Grace took a breath, one filled with conviction and quiet fire. And for those who still cannot understand why this matters, she said, "Let me be clear. Judging someone by the color of their skin is not just wrong. It is dangerous. It is small. It is beneath the dignity of human potential. And it ends here, in this company, under my leadership." The room erupted, not in applause, but in a standing silence. A silence filled with respect, awakening humility. As Grace stepped off the platform, the engineers approached her. One of them, voice wavering, said, "Thank you for standing up for us." Grace smiled gently. "It's not just for you. It's for all of us. For those who came before. For those coming next." But just as the moment settled, a familiar ringtone echoed from her pocket. She answered quietly, "Yes." A voice came through, urgent, trembling. "Grace, there's been another development." "What now?" she asked, her voice steady. The response made her stop mid-step. She froze. Her breath caught. The board members nearby noticed a change in her face. "Grace," Mr. Henry asked, "what's wrong?" Grace lowered the phone slowly. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "They found something at my house." And the atrium moments ago filled with her strength flipped into a new realm of uncertainty. "What did they find?" Mr. Henry pressed gently. But Grace didn't answer, because even she didn't know yet. All she knew was this. Grace's breath steadied as she drove back home, the city rushing past in blurred streaks of light. The earlier strength she displayed at the company's atrium still radiated through her, calm, powerful, unshakable. But as she turned onto her street, she saw flashes of red and blue reflecting off her windows. Security vehicles lined her driveway. A few neighbors stood gathered, whispering among themselves, their faces tight with concern and curiosity. Grace stepped out of her car, shoulders square, chin lifted. The lead security officer approached. "Ms. Morgan, I'm sorry to bring this news to you so soon after everything today." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the gate. "The team found something at your entrance. We believe someone from the online backlash tried to vandalize your property." Grace exhaled softly. "Show me." He stepped aside, and there, streaked across her elegant black gate in bold, red paint were the words, "Know your place." A collective gasp rose from the watching neighbors. Grace stared at the message. No tremble, no panic, no sign of defeat, only clarity. The officer's voice wavered. "We can start cleaning it right away, ma'am." Grace nodded. "Yes, remove it. I won't let their bitterness stain my home." As workers began scrubbing the hateful message away, Grace turned to face the small crowd forming near the driveway. A reporter, who must have arrived moments earlier, stepped forward cautiously, microphone trembling slightly in hand. "Ms. Morgan, after everything today, the incident at your headquarters, and now this, how do you feel?" Grace met the camera, with eyes full of conviction and peace. "How do I feel?" she repeated thoughtfully. "I feel grounded. I feel strong. And most importantly, I know exactly where my place is." The crowd quieted, leaning in. "My place is here," she continued, "standing in a home I built with hard work, vision, and resilience, leading a company that stands for innovation and justice, using my voice to challenge prejudice and uplift those who are overlooked." The wind stirred gently, as if carrying her words farther than the street. She stepped closer to the camera, her voice steady. "Let this moment be a reminder for everyone watching. Never judge someone's worth by the color of their skin. Never assume you understand a person based on stereotypes. Never mistake humility for weakness. And never forget that dignity, equity, and respect are for every human being." The neighbors stood in awe, some ashamed, some inspired, others awakened. Grace turned back to the workers, removing the last traces of the hateful message. Slowly, the red letters disappeared, replaced by the smooth, glossy black gate she had chosen years earlier. Her gate, her boundary, standing restored. And as if sealing the moment, Grace said quietly, "Their words can't define me. My actions do. My character does. My journey does." She walked into her home with an unbroken spirit, closing the door with the same calm confidence she had carried since the day she first stepped inside. Because Grace Morgan knew her place, and it was far above ignorance. If this story inspired you, touched you, or gave you something to think about, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories, and drop a comment below about the lesson that spoke to you the most. Your support helps these stories spread and helps the message of justice, dignity, and equality reach more hearts.